that Sanders was running. But I raise all that because here is an exchange between Elizabeth Warren and a supposed random guy from New Hampshire that I would be willing to bet we will find out later is on the the elect Pete Buttigieg committee or the Joe Biden.
He's white, so he must be an elect Pete Buttigieg committee.
But there's no doubt in my mind that this is this is not just some random guy who's getting this upset about this, but this is a critique that we're going to hear in the general election. I think if Sanders or Warren is the nominee, about the idea of debt relief for college loans.
My daughter's getting out of school. I saved all my money. She doesn't have any student loans. Am I going to get my money back? So you're going to pay for people who didn't save any money, and those of us that did the right thing get screwed. No, it's not even. Of course we did. My buddy had fun, bought a car, went on vacations. I saved my money. He made more than I did. But I worked a double shift, worked extra. My daughter's work, she gets 10. So you're laughing. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. We did the right thing, and we get screwed. I appreciate it.
All right, pause it. There's no doubt in my mind this guy's a plant. No doubt in my mind. That is just one of the most bizarre exchanges I think I've ever seen. But just to be clear on what he was saying, he went up and he said, hey, if you do this college debt relief thing, am I going to get my money back? And she goes, no, of course not. And he goes, you're laughing at us. My buddy, I got a buddy who he just went on vacations and did all sorts of things.
And he owns a boat. And he makes more money than me.
And he makes more money than me.
That has to be.
And
BS.
I saved my money and I worked a double shift and I did the right thing and I did I paid off my college loans. And you're just laughing at us. And then he literally ran off. So he's a fix, but
drive by.
But we get a sense of what the critique is. And then Fox and Friends somehow picked up on this, and they had Dan Crenshaw on to talk about it. And here is the Fox and Friends.
What's going on with that guy?
He goes on to say, look, my neighbor, he took a vacation, had a lot of fun, and I played by the rules, and he gets everything free. Is that fair?
Yeah, he's asking the question that a lot of Americans would like to ask Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and everybody who's offering to cancel student debt. It's a false sense of compassion that they're offering. They always cloak their policies in compassion, but it's a lie. This isn't fair. It's not fair to take from other people and give to someone else just because you want their votes. That's the definition of buying votes.
Is that what's happening?
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, if you look to the pandering that these Democrat candidates do, it's always about getting votes. We're going to give you something in return. We want your votes. We want your support. And that's exactly what they're doing. But no, you cannot take the taxes away from people who
Pause it for 1 second. And I want you to go back because what he's about to say is a lie. But my understanding of politics is that politicians come to you and promise you things and to get your vote. But the problem is only when they don't deliver on their promises, not that they're actually saying, I'm going to do things that you like and want and expect.
That's not fair. That's cheating.
That's cheating. But here he goes on to lie because remember, there are two people in the Democratic primary who have some form of plan of debt relief for student debt, and it is all paid for by taxes from either a financial transaction tax from Wall Street or part of a wealth tax. So very, very wealthy people. There is nobody, maybe it's possible, there's one or two, but there shouldn't be, who has taken a student loan and paid it back, who would be subject to the taxes that would pay for this.
I have a buddy who's a DuPont, but all he does is party.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something in return, we want your votes, we want your support. And that's exactly what they're doing. But no, you cannot take the taxes away from people who have paid off their student loans or people who didn't get to go to college and maybe got a vocational training certificate instead, working hard. You want to take their tax money and pay off somebody else's investment? Because this isn't just a loan, it's an investment in your future. And it was your choice to do it.
Right.
And that's how, and you should need to pay that back.
And you make people who actually do pay it back look like suckers. When you have baby bucks and $1,000 because of automation, that's been the theme on the left.
But then people get hit twice. Like if you paid for your kids to go to college and then
then she comes in, you've already paid your money, then she comes in and she gets elected, then your tax dollars she's going to take to go pay off someone else's student loans.
Absolutely.
Is that
This makes a lot of sense because, like, if someone 50 years ago got polio, it's not fair if we invent a polio vaccine to prevent everyone else from getting polio. Yes. Because at that point we're allowing the people who died of polio's, I don't know. Like,
some polio survivor, a fake polio survivor goes up.
The government goes and spends money to develop a polio vaccine, and this is true of a lot of things. Like even just technologies that would save anybody's lives
under the guise of compassion. By the way,
it's just not fair.
I think this is a fair question, and I think it's one that Bernie would deal with probably more effectively than Warren if it's asked to him. I mean, the idea of social democracy or socialism, whatever you want to call it, is going to require a real paradigm shift on the part of everybody whose support it needs to get in order to happen. So
if that's the way he deals with it, then I would say
it's
he's not dealing with it well.
Well, no, that's just what I'm saying right now to all of you. But like, maybe it's not fair on some level if somebody worked really hard to repay a loan and then the system changes and now everyone's loans are forgiven, but they're still thinking in the old like zero sum mentality where they're not going to be provided for and they're going to have to sacrifice. If it comes along with a whole bunch of other programs that ensure people that they're going to be okay, well, I think it'll be an easier pill to swallow.
The problem is that I think like the polio, and there's a lot of examples like that, right? And there's stuff like you could say like, well, wait a second. There's a lot of different ways in which you address that. I think the polio one, sort of expresses it well. I think the idea that, look, this is obviously not a program that you do in isolation. It's got to come with a whole series of things, which is what Jamie is saying.
And it's going to soak the rich.
But I think, the idea that, the important part is, and this is the tell, that they've got to tell that lie to sell it. Right? Like the compassion thing, like even the sort of like they're promising stuff that's not going to work. And again, remember, right? If the strategy that Donald Trump is going to have with really any Democratic candidate, it's going to be harder with some than others, it seems to me, is to suppress Democratic vote. Right? That's ultimately what it's going to be, because there's not going to be a lot of people he can convince that he hasn't already convinced, particularly, unless because Clinton coming off of Obama basically is the trifecta in terms of how you want to suppress Democratic votes.
We have indication from 2018, just real quick, that people who were of the sort of, maybe I'll buy some of this scam and I'm disgusted by Clinton, are either, are not, like, it's just the Republican base now. I don't think there's like new room for him to grow.
There could be a little bit, but not significantly. The big thing he has to do is suppress Democratic vote. And something like this could suppress the votes of a certain cohort. It's obviously, you're not going for the full, but the way that they're approaching it is like the old, you're promising stuff that's not gonna, that was Mitt Romney, right? Like the haves and the haves not, the 51%, they just want stuff. It's just a bribe. That doesn't work. The fake compassion thing, that also does not work for anybody who would be voting for a Democrat. I think that idea about saying like, wait a second, I paid off my loans, and now you're going to tax me to pay off their loans? That, I think, has to be, that's a lie.
Debunk that lie.
That's a lie.
Well, you got to debunk that lie fast.
I think this also ties into issues we talk about around means testing, where people resent people who are just below them and receiving goodies that they're not getting.
Well, that's the point, is that there's the reality is with any government plans, anything that the government does, you're picking winners and losers. So the question is which cohort of winners are you going to pick? Which cohort of losers are you going to pick? And there's an inevitability that there's some people who, because you can't go back and say like, oh, we shouldn't have come up with a cure for polio because there are people still suffering from it.
Well, that's why universal programs are so powerful, though, because hopefully once people realize this is not just for people just below me, it's going to be okay.
Paying college debt off for people who have college debt is not a universal program.
No,
It's
I
not.
know. But if they get other universal programs, that I'm hoping that it'll be an easier shift for them to make, because they won't
according
be so
to what you're
scared
saying,
that people
you
just below
shouldn't do
them
this.
will be getting.
But Jamie, according to what you're saying, then you shouldn't do this.
No, I'm just
'Cause
saying
it's not
you
a
need to pair
universal
it
program.
With, you need to pair it with lots of universal programs.
Well, yes, we said that.
I mean, I think the key is, generally speaking, like the first to dispel the lie that it's being paid for by like the raising the taxes on people, because that at its core is just false, right? But the reason why you dispel that narrative is because like you said, there will always be winners and losers when you do stuff like this. But usually when the winners are the people who benefit are the rich, that part of the conversation is erased because it's presumed that they should be benefiting. And if it's brought up, it's framed in a way that, well, the rich benefiting from, or, from trend not being taxed, having capital gains taxed or whatever, will trickle down. You don't use the word trickle down anymore because that's been perfectly debunked. But like, it's about actually, bringing the fact that some people are benefiting from this, and it's the rich, into the conversation in order to make it more palatable to everyone else and make them understand, like, no, the only people who are going to be losing are billionaires. That's it. There will be winners, there will be losers. You're going to win. Those people are going to lose. Of course, it's going to be a frame that's like divisive by, any number of blue dog Democrats or corporate line Democrats as well. But it's important to not erase that from the conversation, and by putting the idea that taxing the rich or taxing Wall Street is just never on the table to begin with, I think.
It seems to me that the difference between this, and of course, like we have a mortgage interest deduction, which favors wealthy people. Mm-hmm. And you never hear any complaints about that, at least, broadly speaking, like this is unfair. Nobody's going up to any candidate and going, like this mortgage interest deduction's unfair because I'm paying my dues, I'm working overtime, and I'm doing rent.
Frankly, maybe they should.
The arguments here, it seems to me, are this. No one is disadvantaged by this, by the paying off the debts, except for billionaires and 100 or 50 million plus heirs, as it were. No one's being disadvantaged, right? They're being disadvantaged. They're having to pay more taxes, but no one else is being disadvantaged. To the extent that the advantage is not given more broadly, the argument goes, it's the polio, but the other advantage is that now we have less people going around with polio. In other words, the economy is going to be enhanced
and also
by this. And so your son or daughter who you paid for going to college is advantaged because the economy is going to be better. And I would also argue that there is going to be, not just broadly speaking, because there's going to be more money. I mean, we have from home starts to all sorts of consumer goods are inhibited because of the debt. But also, you're going to have more people who are going to be able to go into jobs that are less high paying and more social services because they're no longer constrained by their debt to have to go get a high paying job.
I also I'm sorry. Those are all the best points, and I love the polio thing. But I also feel like if you can do this as a candidate because there won't be enough time. But in talking with like other people about this stuff, not that guy, because I think we know what that guy is, but you also could so clearly say, like, in most normal people's family dynamics, like, all right, sure, but hey, do you have an uncle that you need, or a brother that sometimes you need to help out because they're drowning with X, Y, and Z? Oh, why is part of the reason they're drowning with X, Y, and Z? Because of their kids' college debts. Like, the idea that this doesn't sort of generally touch most people, even people who have it paid off, even people who have done X, Y, and Z, is just not true. I mean, this is something that's bleeding a lot of people. And I think it's not as central as economic benefit only hurts the rich, and don't act like, don't be someone who had polio before the polio vaccine. But I think it's also just crazy to think of it as like in isolation. Like people's financial lives are interdependent.
I mean, that's why I used the polio example to begin with, because that's a public health question. If people can understand, if you make that sort of reductive analogy that, just because I don't have polio or no one in my family has polio, that doesn't mean there's not a problem with polio going unvaccinated with society, because then you might contract it, right? So this is a question about, social health, like societal health. The idea of free public education being a fundamental necessity within a democratic society goes all the way back to the founding fathers. There's writing, it might not be John Adams, but it's one of the founding fathers. There's writing regarding like the need to establish free public education in society. I mean, obviously they're up until like 8th grade, just for social health, because, you know, a functioning democracy requires people to not only have, you know, critical learning skills, but empathetic learning skills, being able to like go to schools that are diverse of race, diverse of gender, diverse of ethnic and socioeconomic background. And for some people, that doesn't even really happen until they go to college. It's like, how many people don't, you know, meet another person or meet a person of color until they finally leave, you know, Boise, Idaho. I'm sure Black people in Boise, Idaho, but example, and go to, I don't know, Idaho State, or go to like Wesleyan, or go to any number of schools. And so like really this is about, you know, redefining the entire conversation about, you know, the smallest applicable level of social, or like of the government should be engaging in socially. I think we're still, sorry, let me rephrase that. Like, people are still thinking in the neoliberal individualization, like, hey, it's me and my family, and there's no such thing as society. It's like, well, no, actually, this is, along with winners and losers, like, this will have a net benefit for society that you may not be able to appreciate or knowingly appreciate fully personally, but it's going to, you know, not necessarily raise, well, it will raise all ships, but you'll notice an increased social health. You know, and I think that's an important thing, maybe a little bit too nuanced for like the debate
I think
stage.
Bernie's putting that on table.
But,
Well, Bernie in a dollar suit going, you loved your Obama phones.
Yeah.
Get ready for more free stuff.
I was just thinking about Obama phones.
Matthew, let's go.